It's March. We've hit the end of March, heading into April, and we're super excited for this month's guest. Let me just get a quick bio into him. I'm gonna do it. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Edu Steps powered by Lighting Your Success. Olay Shorunke here with Festus Amoye and our wonderful guest for this month, Dr. Derek Irvin. Let me read a quick bio. Dr. Derek Irvin is a dedicated educator, veteran, and advocate for inclusive education. Currently serving as a program director of the VAST Academy at the Houston Community College. He oversees vocational advancement and skills training programs for students with intellectual and developmental challenges, whom he refers to as differentially able to emphasize their unique abilities. Dr. Irvin began his career in the United States Air Force and transitioned into education, where he has held various roles at HCC, including directing the Alternative Teacher Certification Program. He revitalized his program during his tenure, achieving reaccreditation even amid challenges like the COVID-19 pandemic. His passion extends globally with a strong interest in advancing education initiatives in Africa. Through his work, Dr. Irvin exemplifies leadership in creating accessible and equitable educational opportunities for diverse communities. We are glad and honored to have this month's guest on Edu Steps, Dr. Derek Irvin. Dr. Irvin, thank you so much for being here with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
So on these in-person podcasts, we love for people to tell their journey of becoming successful. I think so often, especially in this generation with social media and all those things, like success is, I have a Lambo, I fly private, and oftentimes we don't get to hear from people who have had journeys of all kind of tumultuous issues and arriving at their version of success. So thank you for being here. And so our first question that we like to kind of ask to everybody is, what was your journey like of both formal and informal education? So if you could share with us, kind of where you grew up, what was your formal training and informal things that kind of directed your path?
Good question. Excellent question. So I am from Southeast Texas, by way of a small town called Stillsby, Texas, and graduated from Woodville High School in Northeast Texas, and came from very, very humble beginnings. I'm the oldest of a number of siblings, a whole lot of us.
A whole lot of us.
It was challenging. I remember times going without food, going without lights. A lot of the clothing we got for school was hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I remember my godparents, because I'm the product of teenage parents. My mom was 15 when she got pregnant, and my dad was 18. And I was born 1 month after she turned 16. And so she was still going to school. My dad went off to some things. And so it was difficult. It was challenging. But one of the things I remember is they treated me like I was an adult. So they never treated me like I was like a kid. And so they fostered this sense of critical thinking in me, right? And although I come from this very humble beginning, I'm looking at others in the community that had more than we had. Kids that are getting clothing, having birthday parties, right? It's things that we take for granted, but we didn't have all that. And so I'm a dreamer. I'm a Piscean, and Pisceans are very much dreamers, right? And so I was inspired by looking at other kids in the neighborhood, other people in the neighborhood, and seeing how they were, I'm going to say progressing, how they were doing economically better than we were, right? And I was always asking myself the question, why? Why is it like this, right? And so by the time I got to high school, I knew the only way out for me was going to be the military. My stepfather fought in Vietnam, and so he would always tell me, they're going to call you off to, it's going to be a draft, they're going to call you off to, he wasn't ugly about it, they're going to call you off to a draft. It's like, I'm saying to myself, okay, if they do, they do. But what I knew then was that was probably going to be my out in terms of moving up mobilely or economically, right? And so I knew it wasn't going to be the Army because he was in the Army, but I had an aunt that was a lifer in the Air Force. She retired as a captain in the Air Force. And she had came home one year to visit from her world travels. And I met her for the first time, fell in love with her, and just hanging out at her house all the time talking about her travels. And so that's how I ended up going to the Air Force. And it was tough. I had to take the test twice to get the requisite score I needed. I could have went into the other branches, but it was the Air Force that I wanted because of Aunt Hyman. She had all these things from her travels that she had purchased. And I mean, I was just inspired to go up to the Air Force. And so went through basic training, met some good friends, went overseas for my first 3 years. And I was in law enforcement. Hated it. Absolutely hated it. But the wonderful thing about it was it is what seeded my, I think it expanded not only my love for learning, but more importantly, for knowing the law, right? And did that for 3 years, cross-trained then into education and training is what it was called then. I forget what it's called now. But in essence, it was education. And where it was at the forefront of, telling my age, but it was at the forefront of the computer-based training, where we actually developed computer-based instruction around the F-15 and F-16 aircraft. So we would take all the lessons and all the instruction and all the content, develop it out onto this. I mean, our CDs are like this now, right? What's that weird talk? I know, right? Yeah, that part. I mean, it was probably about as big as this table, right? I mean, huge discs where we would upload all the content on and then develop the assessments and what have you. And then we would actually go through to try to make the lessons break. That was fun, but I had no clue that education was my calling. Because one of the things we might get to later is that I think the military and education in general fail to ask you when you're taking these different assessments or just having a conversation is who you are and what is your purpose. I think those two questions are what's missing when it comes to education in general.
Absolutely.
And so had I known, I'd probably be president by now, for university. But that's okay. I think everything happens in its proper time. And so left the military, got out, not knowing still that education was my calling, worked in several industries, law enforcement, banking, healthcare, etc. And it was, fast forwarding, it was one of my best friends to this very day. He still works at the college, invited me to come by his GED class to speak to his students. And he had been telling me for years, you should be in education. You should be in education. You should be in education. I was like, education not for me. So I went and presented, it was only supposed to be for like 30 minutes on Finance 101, semicolon, credit repair. Because I had a business at the time doing credit repair. And I went and spoke to the students about it. About an hour and a half later, he had to just cut it off because they kept asking questions. It was just that they were just that engaged. And of course I had a flyer. I passed out the flyer at the end. And they were calling. They were emailing. I mean, when you coming back? And my best friend, he called me and says, just every day they ask me, when you gonna come back? And I said, huh? He says, I told you they were gonna love you and that you should be in education. I said, you mean I can get paid to do this? 6-7 months later is when I was hired at Lone Star and at HEC, teaching GED and ESL classes. Fast forward from there, it was 9 months later, I was hired as a program director for the Alternative Teacher Certification Program. Did that for 3 years, moved from there to what's called correctional education. And that is basically where a college or university basically packs up the instruction and go into a secure facility like a jail or a prison. Never would have thought that I would have found myself teaching in a jail, but the college, HCC, has a partnership with the Sheriff's Department at the time. And we taught a battery of different courses from business communication, workplace communication, job search, resume writing, interviewing. There were 16 different vocational programs, from culinary to welding to auto body, construction, basic construction. Absolutely phenomenal. And how I got there was I had just entered a doctoral program at the Prairie View A&M University, and the professor, Dr. Pamela Barbara Freeman, was insisting that we knew what our research topic was going to be about. I had already begun to kind of look at and play with different topics before I even started classes. Many professors, even as I sit here, believe that students don't have to know. Just figure it out once you get in. So she stopped the press, she stopped instruction one night and said, you guys need to know, because she had asked enough of us. And they were not giving her the answer that she was wanting. And she was like, we're not going to do this. You guys, we're going to start this tonight.
Yeah.
So she started going around the room. And when you're in a doctoral program, you probably heard the horror stories. You really want to please your professors. You don't want to take them off for no reason, right? And so my heart was beating. I mean, I was sweating bullets. And so she was going around the room, just like started here, and I was like here. There was one more person here at the other table. She stopped right here at about 9:30 at night. And she says, okay, thank you. Some of my classmates were getting up. They were really upset with the way she was, because she was Socratically.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Why that?
I mean,
why
she
that,
was
why
going
this?
at that part.
Yeah.
I mean, they were really getting upset, right? And I'm just over my heart just being like, she gonna wear me out. She gonna wear me out. And so she stopped, as God would have it. She stopped right here with the person that was sitting next to me. And I was thanking God in my mind. I was like, okay, good. Went home that night, living in Sugar Land at the time. Mind you, I'm leaving Prairie View like at 9:30 that night.
Wow.
It was an exceptional class, by the way. Going home, I didn't go to bed until like 2 o'clock the next morning because I had to figure this out. That next Friday, went to class. Just okay, we'll start with Mr. Derek. It's okay. What is your 3 questions? Like, what is your problem? What is the purpose of your research and the significance of your research? 3 basic questions that she would ask. And I wrote it out there, and she was writing it on the board.
She never gave me time.
She wrote on the board, and she stopped, and she looked back, and she was like, okay, good. Next, I was the only one.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I was very quiet in class, believe it or not, that she did not drill like she drilled the others.
Wow.
And so that is how I ended up going to working in correctional education, because the topic was looking at really the effect of the prison industrial complex on the Black and brown community, particularly African American and Hispanic males. And more importantly, looking at all the educational programs that are out there that are recruiting students into college programs.
Yeah.
But the numbers really weren't budging.
Yeah.
Right? And then you look at all of us in jail. I think at the time it was like 2 million people locked up in jail and prison in 2013. August 2013 is when I came across this statistic. And I just fell in love with not only correctional education, but understood that, okay, what am I going to do with this doctorate once I'm done?
Yeah.
Because there's only a few of us that are African American with these terminal degrees, right? And so fast forward 3 years program director in the ACP program, 6 years working in the correctional education program, which was wonderful because I'm working in the field as a leader and as a professor, but I'm also in this doctoral program researching all things with that.
Wow.
And then I leave there only to be called back to the alternative certification program at the college. And this is public information. The program wasn't in good shape when they called me back.
Come fix this.
I told them, give me 24 hours to think about it.
Yeah.
I knew it was in bad shape, but not
And
as bad as I found out, like within the first 2 or 3 days. And it took 4 years, but we turned it around, and that was during COVID. And the current role is program director in the VAS Academy, where we're working with students that are intellectually, developmentally other able, right? Because I think one of the things we have to fix in this country is being careful of our word choices, right? That these students, although they're autistic, although they are some of them have OCD, ADHD, etc., dyslexia, that we as educators particular need to be focusing on their abilities.
Yeah.
And I can say right now that it is the best opportunity I have had yet in education, from the military until now. All of my jobs have been wonderful jobs in education, but this one is the icing on the cake, because now I can say I've worked with every type of student. On the academic, workforce, correctional education, prison programs, and now students that are disabled.
That's amazing, and that's why we're so glad to have you here, because so often when people think about education, they're just thinking about going to public school down the street, and they don't often think about what goes into the educators themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there's some things that you said that you embodied that reflect laddering success and our being on doing methodology. The fact that it you started out having a desire to grow, having a desire to exceed your current family situation.
Yes.
But then it took the inspiration of a mentor in the form of a family member who gave you that informal spark that was like, okay, tell me about this, tell me about that. And then you said, okay, how do I get it?
Yeah.
And then taking that step, that's one thing we tell students is like, there's really only about 6 things you could do after high school. You know what I mean? And it sounds like, you did almost all 6 of them. Started a business, went to college, went to the military, so you've done all of it, and then went for more formal education. And so you kind of, in a nutshell, embody those things.
Hey, LYS fam, it's Olay. Thanks so much for listening to LYS. I just wanted to take a quick moment to talk to the parents. That's right, mom and dad. Parents, prepare your child for their best educational fit after high school with our comprehensive LYS Parents Guidebook. Our helpful guide includes a range of activities designed to help you better understand your child's unique gifts and abilities. Additionally, we provide valuable insights into the student loan debt crisis and offer practical tips on how to avoid accumulating large amounts of debt. Our ebook also includes a wealth of information on scholarships, grants, and payment exemptions that can help guide your child towards a bright and successful future. With our expert guidance, you can rest assured that your child is well prepared to make informed decisions about their education and career path. Don't let your child's future be in jeopardy. Invest in their future today by downloading the LYS Parents Guidebook. Simply go to lys.com/parents to get your copy today. Now let's get back to the show, because it's some good topics.
And I know Olay got maybe 1 or 2 things before. I got some questions. I got some follow-up questions. So go ahead, Olay.
Well, there's a lot of parallels to my life that you were actually speaking on. So I got some things. I'm going to ask those questions after Festus asks. I just want if you can give a short answer to this. Part of the reason why I love Houston so much is because Houston is such a diverse city, and it brings in people from everywhere.
Yeah.
And I've met people from all over, and I say, man, every person I've met from this place has been really cool. Every person I've met from this place has been really cool. But if you can, I would love for you to speak just a little bit to the mindset or the dreamer and someone who's coming from a small city, a rural city, a very small city.
Yeah.
I've heard stories of people, and even if you look at history, people will come from very small places, but they've got some of the biggest dreams. Mm-hmm. And I would love if you could just for a little bit to just speak a little bit to that.
That is a really good question, because I had a maternal grandfather, who I never knew. I didn't know him, but Silsbee, Texas is a very small city. It's just about 15 minutes max north of Beaumont, Texas.
Oh.
And so I grew up on a street called 18th Street, which is the name of my business, by the way, 18th Street International. And so I would stay with my godparents on 18th Street, but my mother at the time lived in the projects, Prince Hall Villa. And so when I would be with my mom at times, there's like a little trail that took us from the projects to my grandfather's store, little general store. He had a general store and a barbecue store next door. I didn't know him. Plus, he was a politician. Small town, small city. I didn't get to know him. But here's the thing I think that speaks my direct answer to your question. I went into the store. not one time did he give me anything for free. Not that I expected it.
Wow.
Not that I expected it. It's my grandfather. This is my mother's father. Not that I expected it, but that did something to me because it planted a seed that he's not only a politician, but he's also have this business, right? And it's like, okay, for me, that's what started it. And by the time my mom got with my stepfather and we're going through these rough times or what have you, and then by the time I met my Aunt Ima, it's like, it was, everything just lined up so perfectly. Wow. And I was just always a dreamer. And so to me, when my very best advice for families in terms of planting the right seed to lay the perfect foundation for all things in terms of success, however they want to define it, is you give these kids as many opportunities as you can, even if it's taking them to Galveston.
Yeah.
There are some kids right here into Houston, which I love this city too, and so the diversity is one of the things I love about it. Cost of living is another. Get them away from their communities so they can be open up to other opportunities and experiences.
Wow. I just would like listen more.
I know, right?
But I think,
there's a whole lot more.
Yeah, if I had to like formalize these things into a question, you've got this vast experience in education, way more than most educators can even dream of that's possible. You start doing the PhD work that aligns with your purpose of being able to metaphorically speaking, set people's mind free in this incarcerated setting. So how does that translate and relate to what you want to do on the continent of Africa and in the diaspora regarding education? Because I think, so often, again, we're not a political show, we have no political affiliations, but so often, we think, okay, politics is the way to go. If I vote right, we're free. But it sounds like, it's not enough. And so based off of your perspective, what got you to say, hey, I've been in the prisons, I've been in the schools, I've been GED programs, I've been in all these places. I think broadening the horizons of going the route of, so many people like Garvey and Du Bois and those types of people, and taking education, here in the United States and in certain communities, but also internationally. Could you talk about that?
Yeah. That could be a whole show.
Yeah.
So you mentioned mindset, and when we think about slavery, not just here in the U.S., but the Caribbean and other places around the world, even as we sit here, because slavery still exists, and it even still exists here in these United States, because the Emancipation, when it was written, we're celebrating Black people. We're celebrating, of course, and maybe even the entire nation celebrating that. But there's that one word, except. Slavery shall not exist in these United States except for punishment.
Yeah.
And so when we look at the mindset, the U.S. may have banned slavery at one level, but when you, I know it's not political,
go ahead.
When you enslave the minds,
absolutely.
When you enslave the minds of a people or a person, then you still got them in a slavery. And so, two things, back to those two things I mentioned earlier, it is going to be important that we transform education foundationally, starting with asking two questions.
Come on.
And probably from kindergarten or even preschool to kindergarten, first grade, all the way through high school and into college. Who are you and what is your purpose?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I think we need to change, here we are in the 20th century.
Yeah,
21st century, 2025. And new industries are being developed, AI or what have you is being developed or what have you. But what we're doing, I think, at a level incorrectly in education is we're putting people in these fields or industries just because there's a job opening, as opposed to helping them understand who they are and what their purpose is, right? And then we could better guide them along the term we're using today, like crazy, pathways. Which pathway? Whether it's going to be law, whether it's going to be technology, whether it's going to be health, whether it's going to be engineering, etc. Right? That's what we can do better. And to me, that all speaks to the mindset, right? We can eradicate slavery physically around the world, all day, every day. But if we don't develop the mind, if we don't use education to develop the minds, the mindset, we'll still be enslaved. When we ask the question about the African diaspora, specifically in terms of Africa, this is just me personally.
Now, come on.
When we look at the amount of resources that the continent has, Africa really doesn't need anybody.
What was that?
Africa really doesn't need anybody.
Oh, sir.
It doesn't need Britain. It doesn't need Germany. It doesn't need France and all these other, and I'm going to use the word colonizers because really that's the problem.
Absolutely.
The colonizers. They've convinced, they've shackled the minds of too many of our brothers and sisters who are in leadership. Not all of them. But they've shackled the minds to the point where they believe they got to have the U.S. But yet this current person in the White House, in the United States,
I love it,
have been preaching the last year or so, America first, America first. Okay, very good. I'm for that. I'm for that. I think Africa should be saying the same thing. Africa first. And as Burkina Faso and other countries are starting to preach that, and I think as they slowly experience successes, I hope it spreads like wildfire to the other African countries so that the world understands that we're not these barbarians in huts, in jungles. I had the privilege of going to South Africa, which stole my heart. And interestingly enough, I hadn't even thought, talking about your mind being shackled. Africa was nowhere on my radar to visit up until 2 years ago. And because in the Air Force, I traveled. The two things I joined the military for was education and the travel. And I did both. But the problem is, the little they gave us about Africa and our Black people, it was all negative. So there was nothing about Africa that I wanted to embrace, unfortunately. But fortunately, a friend of mine from Jamaica, there was supposed to be like 10 or 12 of us going to Africa, South Africa. Only 2 of us went. He and I went. And it stole my heart. Because as far as I'm concerned, South Africa to me rivals San Francisco. Yes, there's lots of poverty. And that goes back to the education and the minds being shackled. That you have these colonizers who have convinced the African people at large that they are needed, and they are absolutely not needed. And so what I intend to do, because it's one thing to get this terminal degree. I have 4 degrees. An associate's in paralegal studies, because I wanted to be a lawyer at one point. And then I got my bachelor's in pre-law, my master's in public administration from the Texas Southern University, and of course my doctorate from Prairie University. It is important. It is incredibly important that Black people, particularly those of us in leadership, with a PhD or not, understand one thing. This Bible scripture says, to whom much is given, much is required. So that doctrine is not that I have been blessed with. It's not to sit on some shelf. That the knowledge and skills that I have developed from the PhD program at Prairie View and all the experience I've had in education, that I use that.
Yeah.
And foundationally, what I intend to do is ask the question, who are you?
Yeah, come on.
And what is your purpose?
Yeah.
Foundationally, starting there. And then when I have these continued conversations with deans and vice presidents and directors and program managers and directors in education, then we can discuss what programming should look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make sense? What are those course outcomes, those student outcomes? That should be based on, right, looking at those two questions.
Yeah.
Who are these students? Have you really worked to help them understand who they are? And now we can look at the different pathways that we can put them on.
Absolutely.
There's a part of me that really wants to end right now.
Or that wants to continue.
Well,
that wants to continue, but we gotta.
Because the thing is that, I mean, it was so profound. There was so much.
Oh, the mic drop moment.
It was a very mic drop moment.
Yeah.
To where it was just
So
what do we do next? Yeah. Where do we go from here?
But thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. I think you just so wonderfully, eloquently verbalize just what's been on the heart of so many people for so long.
Yeah.
That they've been thinking about, that they've been wanting to say, but they haven't been able to communicate about.
Mm.
And I think you spoke to this, from a spiritual, just from from a wholeness standpoint.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you so much from a holistic standpoint. And so, thank you for that. I do want to go back just a little bit and ask about kind of what you do now with the BAS program, because you said some things that really spoke to me. Growing up, I dealt with ADHD, and being a child of immigrants, when the labeling issue came about, and I'm speaking into this because I think this is something that affects immigrants. It affects minorities.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think it affects them. I won't say it affects them primarily, but I will say it affects them at a greater
rate.
to a greater extent because of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
From parents saying things like, "This is a spiritual problem.
Uh-huh.
This is something that the belt will handle, or will use just we'll use kind of a logic that really isn't well thought out to deal with this issue."
Yeah.
Hey, LYS fam, it's Olay. If there's one thing I love, it's something free. I'm talking free 99, un gratis. No shipping or handling fees, no gotcha fees, nothing like that. With that being said, if you're graduating soon or thinking about college or need a nudge or help to decide, then our free ebook, 10 Things to Think About Before Going to College, has a very balanced and open-minded way of presenting your next steps. It captures broad topics in a personal way by giving students an insightful, interactive, and reflective source of inspiration. It is very beneficial to be able to visualize some of the concepts after high school and apply them directly to you. We all know life, college, and career planning decision-making choices for students can be challenging, especially as they near the completion of high school. This book will provide you with a self-paced guide to your success beyond academics and into real life. Not only is it free, you can complete this book within a week. This will definitely prepare you for long-term success. To get your free copy, simply go to lys.com/students. I mentioned it was free, right? Well, if I didn't, it's free. Like, for real. Okay, back to the podcast.
And so when I speak, I'm speaking for things I've seen and things in myself that a lot of people are going through. And so I would love for you to speak through your experiences, some of the misconceptions that come with a lot of students, because we both kind of dealt with this, and I'm sure you've seen it too. When you deal with children who are dealing with things like bipolar, schizophrenia, dyslexia, like you mentioned before, all of these different things. What are some of the misconceptions that those kids are dealing with, from a teacher standpoint, from a parental standpoint? And what are some of the things that you've done?
So starting with parents and then the teachers. So, there are still adults, for example, that are getting diagnosed with ADHD or dyslexia or what have you, even as an adult, right? And so I think we can do. We absolutely can do better as a society to better identify these students with these various intellectual or developmental disabilities, right? And I've seen parents, kids in the store with their parents, and, they'll say do one thing or go get something, but then they'll forget. Because you watch parents and their interactions with their kids. And when they do something, I've seen them, it's very close to abuse, right? And so they don't realize they're exacerbating whatever that condition is, right? And then they get into school, and if you got new teachers, for example, and my hat's off to all educators. I thank you for your service. When people find out that I served in the military, they'll tell me, well, thank you for your service. Well, I'm starting to say now to educators, thank you for your service, because I know what you guys are up against. And I think the nation in particular, maybe even the world, got a taste of that during COVID because those babies were at home all day with these parents all day, running amok, right? Go sitting down and do this. Well, no, they're not. There's a condition that has not yet been identified, right, or diagnosed, right? And then you get upset with the teachers, particularly the new ones who's learning, right? And so I think we can do better. I think with the educational process for new teachers. Let me say this real quick. I think teachers, even new teachers, once they get that certification or certifications, they should be paid no less than $75,000. Because when we look at the training they go through, most are getting at least taking two different exams, at least two. Others are taking 3 or 4. And others eventually go back and take additional exams because they want to make themselves more marketable. And when we look at what they do over a 2-year period with the program that I was overseeing, it's equivalent to a master's program, a master's degree, literally, the amount of rigor that goes into that training. So we can do a better job with new teachers in training them, getting them out in the field more often, not just in the classroom learning, but get them out in the field, not just in public schools, but private, parochial schools, and at different levels, so they can get exposed, and not just in the urban schools, and go out to the suburbs, right? So they can get a feel for what's being done, because there is inequity. We have to. It's political. It's not a political show, but it's all things political. So when you now in the news they're saying segregation again. This person. Okay, let's do that. If it's going to force us, I'm going to say this, let's do it on the one hand. Okay, fine. But on the other hand, we'll still have those of us in the community, those of us who are in leadership and education still fighting for equality on the one hand. But on the other hand, if it's going to force us to look at what we're doing in education and come together as a community, so be it. The research shows that Black communities prospered
during that time period,
during segregation, right? But back to new teachers. So that'd be part two. So we really have to do a better job with training new teachers and even master teachers, seasoned teachers, on helping them to identify these students with these different issues. I have a nephew. He's my nephew's son, who I'm very much attached to. He's my little Barack Obama. He's brilliant. From the time he was in daycare until now that he's 5, going on 95, he keeps getting in trouble. So now what we're looking at is, okay, we have to really look at what's happening with him more closely. We're working on getting him to a specialist to find out what's going on, because I think he needs to be challenged more, right? And I think that is a problem across the board in education, period. That particularly with Black and brown boys, they're getting misdiagnosed with ADHD, for example. They're okay. We haven't trained the teachers on how to keep them engaged. But you go to certain school districts, they have TAs. They have less students. You go to the urban schools, you got these teachers in there with not only students with different learning styles, but again, students with disabilities that have not yet been diagnosed. They do not have a TA, and they got 25 or 30 students in there.
Yeah.
How can you possibly manage all that effectively, efficiently, right? So we have a long way to go when it comes to that. My student population now that I'm working with, one of the misconceptions is, well, you see a lot of them in the grocery store, sacking groceries. Let me be clear. These students are brilliant. Brilliant. We have several that can tell you anything about the planets and technology. I mean, they're building PCs. We have a STEM camp that we have every year where they're learning all things about AI and building PCs, right? Learning about 3D printing and printing out stuff like this centerpiece that look like you bought it in Target, although I'm not shopping at Target right now. Excuse me, I'm sorry, that's not what I'm shopping. So they're printing, they're making things that looks like came out of Target. Right? Masterful things, right? So we're working on, we have a full-time program director that's our employment service, that oversees employment services. And she's establishing these relationships with employers. Not just the HEBs and the Targets and the Walmarts where you see a lot of our students with disabilities, bagging groceries. We're working to get them into administrative roles in offices. At colleges. We're employing one, well, not really employing, he's a volunteer right now, but he's acting as a TA. He's a graduate of our program. And he's the one I'm specifically thinking about that knows all things about the planets. When you talk about the planets in this eclipse that we had last year, I mean, he was, you might as well have given him a $1 million check. He was just that kind of excited. And so I think when we work to not only educate them, and help them work through whatever, help them to become aware of their abilities. And then we help to properly place them in certain industries based on their likes, right? Not their dislikes, what they like, what their interests are. Then, as we build out this list of employers, we can better help them get whatever jobs they want to in the end.
Man, so I like roots and trees. Olay will tell you this. I'll kind of start pointing out. And it's funny because it doesn't translate into horticulture yet. You know what I mean? But it's about people. And so I look at etymology of terms, and you look at the word educate, and the Latin it comes from. It's to uplift care or to uplift caution, right? And so oftentimes
to pull out,
right? To really
to
pull
draw
out, to draw out.
And
so oftentimes we don't do that drawing out. We don't do that to draw out and to uplift or to place up of the caution and cares of the person who's being educated. And that's where I think so much of the faultiness in the system is, and I agree with you on this, is that if I don't know who I am and what I care about, there's no possible way that I could care about the thing you're asking me to care about.
Excellent.
And so there becomes this divide, right? In those who kind of get it on their own, they have the parental support, they have community support, they have all those different types of things, and then there's those who do not. And I think that is fostering this divide. So in a final question, because we got to close out, and I wish we could just keep going.
It's been a good conversation.
What would you share with families or individuals today about college and career and military readiness, CCMR? What would you share about that, given your wealth of background and diversity, and seeing what's happening, how the educators are being taught, and also some of their shortcomings that they're coming out with because of the programming shortcomings, right? So what would your final word be if you were to, we're your family, we're your friends, and you just said, hey, listen, I would give you this piece of advice so that you could be the most successful you could be if you're graduating in 2025, 2026, and beyond. What would that be?
Reading. Reading. First and foremost, for me, reading is the most fundamental subject, even when you're talking about math, because you have math problems that they come across that requires reading, right? So first reading, and really working with them to understand what their reading comprehension, right? First and foremost. And as you give them books to read, then come back and ask them questions about what they've read Socratically, right? That's what I do with my nephew. I mean, at 5 years old, he really functions like an 8 or 9 year old, really. And I'm not just saying it because he's my nephew, but it's important that we make sure these students have strong reading skills. And then beyond that, critical thinking skills, right? Critically thinking about who they are, what the world looks like, right? Helping them from very small ages all the way through public school into high school and to college, trying to help them figure out what it is they want to do. All too many, well, I think it's almost like it's an epidemic that we're encouraging them to go to school, but school is being treated too much like a daycare.
Absolutely.
Second.
Yeah.
A second.
Third.
For real, right?
Yeah.
Sir.
And when the kids come home, like with my nephew, I'm asking him, as soon as he get in the car, I'm asking him, okay, how was your day? What did you learn today?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing you'll tell me, Uncle, I had a green day.
Yeah.
Green is being good, right?
Yeah.
Yellow, not good, and then red, you really had a bad day.
Yeah.
Right? But beyond behavior, I'm asking him, okay, what did you learn?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I learned the numbers, and I learned this new word, and his vocabulary is picking up. I mean, it seemed like it's a new word every week, right? And his cognitive abilities, it's just really off the chain. So beyond reading, I would encourage parents, when those babies come home, when those kids come home, ask them about what is it that they learned. Encourage them to write, right? That's going to help them develop their comprehension skills too, right? And then again, taking them on excursions, even if it's to Galveston, to the hills in Austin.
Yeah.
They need to get out of these environments that we bring them in. It's almost like a prison. Yeah. We're spending the money.
Yeah. It's just, where are we spending?
Where are we spending? And we got the money.
Yeah.
Somewhat $1 trillion. I think I read the other day, we're like, if we were in economy, we'd be like the, I don't know, third, fourth.
Oh, Texas, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we're technically the fourth largest economy.
Yeah.
Oh,
the black community.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Like, it's the 8th largest economy or something like that in the world.
Yeah.
If we were to look at the black economy just in the United States, that's crazy. So we got the money. We just really need to figure out how to spend it better. And I think too, because, black people are very spiritual people. Yeah. Right? And so I think part of the answer lies in the churches and the synagogues and the mosques and the cathedrals. Yeah. I think the ministers, one of my favorite of whom right now is Reverend Dr. Jamal Bryant. I mean, he's doing some powerful stuff right now. He's not only teaching all things spiritual or religious, but then all things political too. We have to understand our power and who we are, and really work to come together and create a different narrative. That, we have some issues in our community, fine.
Everybody does, yeah.
But everybody does. But how do we then create greater narratives, better narratives around stuff like this, collaborating among ourselves and getting it out on these podcasts like this and venues like this, so that we take charge of our narrative and ultimately our destiny.
Wish we could stay forever. Olay, do you have anything you want to share before we close out?
Well, I loved what you said in that answer about just speaking to young people. That you reminded me of this TED Talk that I watched that talked about kids in lower income areas and kids in higher income areas, and the number of words, exposure to words that each of them are exposed to. But then I said to myself, there are 7 words that we should all know. The 7 words I picked up, and that is bit up in 2 questions, and it's essentially a lot of what we do with Letter Your Success, which who am I, as you said, and what is my purpose? And I think that those are the 2 biggest things I picked up from everything. It's like just the parallel in those 2. So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Oh man, so there's going to be a part 2 of this. Definitely a part 2. So With that being said, we're going to close out, and we're going to, again, give you the phrase that pays. Listen, there are legitimate excuses for not going to college. There's no legitimate excuse for not getting an education. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Edu Steps, powered by Laddering Success, and we'll see you on the next episode.